And I'm here in Berlin giving a speech.
Yes, sir?
Okay?
Okay.
Alright.
Yeah, just use for both.
Just, Okay, seems that this is unnecessary, so you're going to use this.
That's fine. You can put your fluff in my face.
It's not connected. That's
Not the first time you said this to a black guy, I guess.
No.
But
Not even the first time this week. Right.
focus.
I'm married. You're good. Come on.
So, hi Milo. You mentioned. Yeah, that's a good idea, probably.
This is not my first rodeo. Alright, let's try that again.
Okay. Milo, you mentioned that the new norm is, or the new middle is being socialist from
Yes.
the left. Now we have a new movement, or actually it's pretty old, but it's going to be mainstream pretty soon, and it's eco-socialism. The green parties are trying to use the green movement, the climate movement, to establish socialism as a new norm.
Yes.
The problem that we have here is if you're not for the climate, then you're an evil guy. So it's not only that we are fighting against socialism, but we are also seen as somebody who's fighting against the the Green Party, against our planet, against our Earth.
Right, well, they're always going to characterize views, if you're a libertarian or conservative, as being evil or selfish or whatever. They do it with gender, they do it with race, they do it with all kinds of things, right? So the environmental movement was the first big attempt to map Marxist principles, the oppressor and oppressed dynamic, the bourgeoisie, onto social and other kinds of issues, right? It was very successful. What it did was identify some bad guys, which were, unsurprisingly, the capitalist, Christian, white Western democratic nations. Identify some good guys who needed help, who are actually the big polluters, but never mind that. And try to set people against one another, because that is how communism rises in the first place. This is exactly what they've done with race, exactly what they've done with gender. As long as you understand that this is the strategy that's in place, it becomes a lot easier to combat it, right? And as far as characterizing your views as being selfish or against the environment, all the rest of it, conservatives typically are the ones who actually live in the countryside. They're the ones who live in rural areas. They love nature. They have more animals than with the possible exception of cats, than progressives do. They're the ones who have a vested interest in the environment, not necessarily in conservationism, in the sort of eco sense, but in the natural world, because they're the ones who actually live in it. So there are some quite persuasive and effective rejoinders and rebuttals to their positions. All of them simply require you to do one thing, which is when they call you names, ignore it, and go straight for the jugular on substance. When somebody suggests that your positions are morally reprehensible, they're trying to deflect from the argument you're having and put you on the back foot, make you defensive, make you explain to them why you're not a bad person.
But
this is a distraction technique.
Yeah, but if you're a climate denier, then why would they even care about talking or discussing things with you? Obviously you don't know nothing about science.
But they don't typically, but they're not your audience. They're not going to have a debate with you, but you can take what they say, respond to it for your audience, respond to it for everybody else, and take people with you. And that's exactly what people did do in response to climate change. The public was not persuaded. Germany's a very, eco-fanatic country. But it is relatively unusual in that, right? You look at the British public, you look at the French public, they didn't really buy into that climate change stuff. They were sick of hearing about it. They didn't believe the hysteria. It's like the world's going to be underwater by 2022. Everybody knew it wasn't true. Everybody knew that it was bullying and intimidation and hysteria, and people resented being told that they are the problem when they knew that it was, India and China who were doing 80% of this and 90% of this and 95% of the plastic in the world's oceans comes from, over there. It's not us doing it in the first place. So why should we cripple and destroy our economies and ruin our lives when we're not even the primary offenders? They didn't really win on climate change, except perhaps in Germany, where people didn't feel able to say, you know what, I'm not really too interested in your name calling. I don't agree with your analysis of the problem, and I don't see a persuasive case to change my behavior. But thanks for your opinion. That's something Germans are typically quite bad at doing.
Yes, I agree. What do you think about the merger of these two narratives? One narrative, climate change, and the other one, the refugee problem. Now they are telling us, well, we have to take the climate refugees.
Seriously,
This is what they are telling us. We destroyed the climate, the environment. Therefore, we have the obligation to take those refugees in.
There is an abstract sense in which the climate may play a role in population movement, right? And sometimes that may be right. But there's an assumption in there that we were responsible for that changing climate, which is by no means clear or proven. Yeah? It's by no means universally accepted that the natural changes in the Earth's climate were affected by man's behavior. In fact, most of what we know about this suggests that we don't have much of an effect at all, versus, particularly not in the West, where we have quite clean economies now, versus the developing world, versus the natural processes of the planet, right? The reason these narratives are getting mingled is because they were never separate in the first place. They're all just the same oppressor and oppressed Marxist dynamic mapped onto social issues, mapped onto environmental issues. They're not blending them together, they were always the same. This is about identifying the bad guys, which are capitalists, Western democratic capitalist nations, and punishing them. And when you understand that, it becomes obvious why feminism behaves like it does, Black Lives Matter behaves like it does, and why they all stick up for one another. Because they're all fighting the same war, which is an assault against the successful, free, prosperous, happy Western democracies.
What else besides banning plastic bags, like the great Sargon of Agag mentioned, could we do to save the environment?
I'm sure there are lots of things that we could do to save the environment. It's not a particular interest of mine. So
you don't take the bait?
I will do what is cheapest and most convenient for me. And what that means is the solution to environmental problems, whether it's plastic bags or whatever, is in the market. It has to come from private enterprise, right? When the supermarket provides me with a better quality, cheaper product, I'll switch to that. Yeah. So what environmentalists should be doing, and people who care, desperately about the environment, my thing is free speech. I'm not, I don't have time for all that. It's not a huge worry of mine. But if it is a huge worry of yours, the proper place for your activism is with consumers and private enterprise, not lobbying government to start interfering in the relationship between me and the supermarket and telling the supermarket what kinds of interactions we can have. It's not a proper place for government, and it's just a license for the government to trample on more rights later on, right? So I'm sure there's lots you can do for the environment, but it has to start and finish in the free market, not with government finding new things to ban, to regulate, and to interfere with.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks. So, I support people for as long as they can.
But you will support Trump again, right?
Against the alternative, for sure. Yeah, I mean, he has not made me particularly happy, but given the alternative, sure.
I don't think that there is an alternative, just the alternative for Deutschland.
What a lovely Uncle Joe. You don't like Uncle Joe?
Uncle Joe?
Joe Biden?
Oh my God.
President Biden? Is he creepy? I think he's lovely. I think he's a nice, sweet old grandpa.
But I think he's the best they got, the Democrats. I mean, all of the others, they are lunatics.
I want either Trump Yang or Trump Buttigieg. These are the two battles. I would be happy with either.
Yeah. Don't you like Bernie Sanders? Like as an honest guy, he says what he wants.
I respect his long and obscure career born out of principle. I don't respect how easily he jettisoned away his own beliefs when he started making a bit of money. Because I think he got very, very quickly corrupted by having a bit of money, being able to buy a couple of houses and all the rest of it. I don't think he's a plausible, defensible socialist candidate anymore. I respect people who toil in the wilderness like he did for decades, never changing what they believe, waiting for their moment. But his moment has come and gone, and he's now damaged goods.
Switching from an American college professor to Canadian, Jordan Peterson. I listened to Vox Day's podcast, and he said that you, from the first moment, know that something was wrong with Jordan Peterson.
He had the whiff of sulfur about him. There was just something a little bit off. And I have been proven right many, many times over. I respect people who put their money where their mouth is. And Jordan Peterson says some of the right things right up until you need him the most. Covington, he could have saved those boys that whole ordeal. Chose not to. The latest bans from Facebook and Instagram, silent. He sent 6 tweets on completely irrelevant different subjects, and then because he got so much blowback for not supporting free speech, he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, my wife's really sick, I'm rushing to hospital." How long does it take to send a tweet? And why did you send 6 about other subjects? He's a coward, and he doesn't stand up for people who put him where he is, and he doesn't stand up for the people who have made him rich and famous. Jordan Peterson only looks after Jordan Peterson, and I don't respect that. Much of what he says is wonderful and insightful. The majority of his influence on public life has been positive. I love it when he gives leftists a bloody nose on TV, but as a man, I find him to be a coward, and I find him to be self-interested, and I don't respect him.
Do you think that he's right when he says that inequality is the main cause for all the problems that we have in the world, in every civilization?
No, of course not. But he's a leftist. I mean, the whole intellectual dark web, they're all left wing. I mean, even Ben Shapiro is pro-gay marriage, right? I mean, Ben Shapiro has gone through this weird contortion where he used to be like he used to be. Yes, he used to get. Well, now his position is the government shouldn't have a role in it. It's a sort of fudge because he knows the young people that he wants to listen to his podcast wouldn't tolerate his real opinions. So he's changed them. From when he was like a ferocious Republican kind of spitfire, now he's kind of like reimagining himself as more of a libertarian because he knows that's more palatable to young people. I am very admiring of the machine that Ben Shapiro has built, but I have no idea what he really believes.
I'm a Catholic as well, so I respect that you wrote a book about the new Pope. But if you look at the theoretical basis of Christianity, socialism also has its roots in Christianity, doesn't it?
There is quite a strong argument that a lot of left-wing principles spring naturally from Christianity. I think it's true, and I've said in the past, that Catholics invented social justice, I think it's possible to read things that way, but that isn't actually how history played out. In fact, Christianity and capitalism grew up together, existed in symbiosis, were impossible without one another, right? And not just Christianity, but specifically Catholicism, right? In theory, it makes sense, but that isn't what happened. And in fact, it's not what happens anywhere. Capitalism is very happy to accommodate religion, and Christianity is always very happy to adapt itself to circumstance, and it's a very highly adaptable modern religion in that way. But communist states don't typically appreciate or tolerate state religions because it represents an alternative power source that they can't tolerate. So you might say, well, don't socialist principles spring from Catholic doctrine? On one reading, maybe, but very quickly they become incompatible and mutually exclusive systems in a way that capitalism and Christianity aren't.
I want to love Catholicism.
That was a good answer.
Difficult. Yeah, it's really great.
Now and again, you have to congratulate yourself.
I just send you the questions.
If nobody does, right?
No, it's like never been asked that before, but nailed it. Right. So that was.
Because